we were prompted really to hold this meeting because we've come across instances of where businesses have changed direction to cope with the coronavirus crisis and so on. Give you a few examples of what we've seen. We act for a food wholesale company who sell to restaurants and food, sort of fast food outlets and that sort of thing. And suddenly they found their orders had disappeared. So they came up with a plan to sell direct to the public online, which meant that they had to build a website, build a brand, and so forth. We've had a company that has been making hygiene systems to make sure people wash their hands properly, which sounds ridiculous, but it's actually quite a clever system because it won't let you into the building unless your hands are properly clean. Now that started off with biosecurity for plant growers, but there was an opportunity seen there, and so they're following that. We have a client who is involved in dental work, and of course dentists all shut down, so that source of work disappeared. But then gradually they saw another opportunity related to the dental field, and so they're now doing reasonably well in a totally different area from what they were doing a few months ago. So we thought really, well, there must be other instances of this sort of thing happening. It'd be interesting to see, share experiences on that and to hear what's been happening and where companies have reacted and maybe found a new direction to go in, which in the long term will maybe mean they do better than they might have done before. So on our panel this morning, we have, I'm pleased to say, Sue Carter, who's UK Head of Professional Services Sector, Clydesdale Yorkshire Bank Group. And I think that now includes Virgin Money, doesn't it, Sue?
It does indeed, Keith.
Yeah, interesting. We have James Pinchbeck, who is Marketing Partner of Streets Chartered Accountants. I think they're a UK top 40 firm.
Yeah, Damon's going to pit me now at this, aren't you, Damon?
I'm not sure whether I should have mentioned that with Damon there, but,
yeah.
but then he can put his pitch for the top whatever in later. And we have Azam Zia, who is a partner in corporate and commercial in Chatterton Solicitors, and they're a leading firm in Lincolnshire and the East Midlands. So we're going to really spend about 30 minutes on two sort of topics, and then have 15 minutes at the end for questions. If you've got any questions, if you can put them in the chat box, that would be helpful, because otherwise there's an embarrassing silence at the end when we say there's any questions. So, so we'll start off, I think, with how have your clients reacted to the disruption? So, Sue, cash flow is an obvious factor for companies during this period of disruption. I mean, how have the bank's customers been coping?
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Thanks for the question, Keith. So, irrespective of industry, protecting their cash position has been a top priority. Many have taken advantage of the various support measures, including the government-backed loans, capital repayment holidays, as well as other initiatives such as the Job Retention Scheme, deferral of VAT, business rate relief and business support grants. Clydesdale and Yorkshire banks are participants of the 3 government-backed loan schemes to support those businesses that have been impacted by COVID-19. In addition, for anyone with a fixed term deposit, we also offered them early access to those funds. Latest government data indicates that UK firms have received £34 billion across over 1 million of the smaller bounce back loan applications. And then the Treasurer has also revealed that £12 billion has helped support more than 53,500 businesses by way of the coronavirus business interruption loans. and then a further 3 billion have been approved under the coronavirus large business interruption loan schemes. So that's a total of 49 billion pounds, and that's still growing. Undoubtedly, SMEs have been the hardest hit, but actually I think they should be optimistic, as our latest research shows that 37% of us have increased our spending with local independent businesses. And whilst almost all of us, 96%, say it's been important to support those local businesses during the pandemic. There's now a race by businesses to develop a sustainability strategy for their own operations. And sustainability isn't a project or an initiative, but needs to be embedded as business as usual. The next 6 months will be critical in terms of cash. As payment holidays come to an end, job losses are being considered, as furlough comes to an end, and repayments start on that first batch of those government-backed loans approved in the spring. I think businesses have coped reasonably well, but there are perhaps still more challenging times ahead.
Right, thank you, Sue. So how have your clients reacted to the legal issues arising from this period of disruption, Azam?
So we're looking at quite a wide spectrum of clients. So on the one hand, you've got companies that, for want of a better phrase, they were hand to mouth pre-lockdown. So these are usually smaller companies. Now, with those companies, there was a lot of concern initially, certainly. Then you've got the companies who, they had all the trappings of success. But so they've got the large offices and the company cars and all the rest of it. But when you actually drill down into the numbers, they're saddled with huge debt. They've got massive outgoings. Now those companies ground to a halt very, very quickly. And then you've got the old guard. And now that's not a comment on age. It's more of a comment on business style, and includes some very young entrepreneurs who were successful pre-lockdown. But they were also financially prudent pre-lockdown. Now they can continue 12, 18, in some cases 24 months without any new business coming in. So they have the same concerns, but without perhaps the same sense of panic. So when lockdown was introduced, when it was announced initially, there was that confusion and panic, I guess. But then the government stepped into the breach with their sweeping measures. Now, while a number of businesses fell through the gaps still, there was a palpable sense of calm across the community. So the legal issues that actually came up out of this, actually, they overlapped. There were legal issues and accounting issues and HR issues all at the same time. So you had a number of professional advisors across the board who started interpreting government advice as quickly as it was being introduced, which really helped. So while initially certainly transactional work held its breath almost, we're now looking at something like a return to pre-lockdown levels of activity.
Interesting. Thank you. So James, I mean, have any of your firm's clients been able to use this period of disruption to do something new?
Yeah, I think if you take it, there are a number of scenarios for the business sector. Those business that lockdown meant that they couldn't undertake their business, literally, because their markets were not accessible and people couldn't undertake transactions with them. Those businesses that adapted to the new working environment, I mean, particularly, if you take professional service firms and professional firms, those that have intellectual capital, what equipment they require is a good internet access and a laptop or something, have been able to function relatively effectively. And in some cases, I think productivity has improved, which is either a good or bad thing, which we can talk about later, why that productivity has improved. The other nature of our client base has been, and similarly to a regional accounting firm like ourselves or other firms, we have a diverse client base and they respond accordingly. The we've seen clients that, and you mentioned food in particular, a number of food outlets, restaurant outlets who've switched to takeaway provision or alternative provisions, to those businesses that perhaps are retail based who have adapted to online delivery quite quickly and responsively. I think the interesting one for me has been those businesses that, particularly in the tech and innovation sector, who have responded very, very quickly to opportunity. I can name sort of 3 client scenarios where one has developed a wristband for social distancing. They already have the technology for something else, and they've reapplied it to something else where it actually vibrates if you're within the social distancing bands, through to another one which is in the NHS sector. For vulnerable adults, has developed an appointment system for vulnerable adults, through to a clothing manufacturer who's developed smart clothing that actually helps repel or not actually embed viral conditions into the fabric. So all sorts of innovation, and I think that also reflects that type of sector. The nature and the characteristics of those entrepreneurs or innovative businesses are capable of creating and responding to opportunity quite successfully and quickly. The other areas I think we look at are those businesses in particular who have been unable to do business, the diversity of ideas and multi-channels of income streams they've created. So we have an exhibition events manufacturing business who've diversified into everything from garden bars and pizzas. You know, the quest to survive and the need to survive is paramount. Though all the funding, as Sue's already alluded to, or more than alluded to, talked about, the funding that has been available has been extensive. But equally, businesses need to actually create additional funding and profitability to even take advantage of that funding, because you've got to repay at the end of the day. So we've seen quite a resilience. I think the other areas for some businesses has been to use the time to look at the business model, that actually, a bit like our own personal lives, a lot of people are using this time to reflect on what is important to them. You know, the pace of business in this day and age is so rapid that we don't always get the time to sit back and look and reflect at our business model, why we're in business, what we want out of that business, where is everything going. You know, time to invest, and use that time to invest in business. The other area, just if I may talk about, Keith, is maybe I chair Lincoln College and involved in the university. And actually, what I have been extremely impressed is the ability of the education sector to respond to the circumstances. You know, blended and remote learning, how we've adapted to that, given there was a lot of talk about, is the technology, as we went into lockdown, will we all grind to a halt? You know, will the hamsters on the internet power wheel pack up? You know, but it seems to have worked, and we've become very resilient. So yeah, we've seen quite a lot of innovation and imaginative thinking across a host of industry and sectors.
Interesting. So really, we've got a situation where, okay, there will be some businesses that are going to disappear because they were on shaky ground beforehand, and this is just given the final shake, as it were, to knock the building down. There are those businesses, though, who have adapted and who maybe are finding a better way to work, maybe are finding new markets. It'll be interesting to see how much of all this sticks if we ever get back to normal, if we know what normal is. So, you know, it's interesting to see that some companies will come out of this stronger and some will disappear. Okay, really, the second topic we wanted to deal with was, you know, tips or advice that we can offer businesses at this stage, if they haven't already moved forward sufficiently. I mean, James, you were saying about how this is a time to rethink not just your business, but rethink why you're doing business even. So have you any tips or advice that we can offer to businesses at this stage? And so I'll go back to you, James. Have you got any tips from your clients' experiences?
Yeah, I think first of all, the end of lockdown was, there's a sort of phrase like the bounce back, and returning to business, I think the first point is to start with a reflection of what you had in pre-lockdown. Does it exist post-lockdown? And that is both your business and market environment, but also the structure and nature of your business and the objectives and its strategy. But actually, if you start with the strategy pre-lockdown, maybe to do something like, I don't know, to expand into new markets. Actually, the post-lockdown, sorry, I'll get onto Brexit now, the post-lockdown, or as we start to ease lockdown or start to open up businesses, actually maybe, and for many businesses, a focus on preserving cash, profitability, sustainability. And I actually generally think there will be a much different approach to financial management. If I was somewhat pleasantly surprised when the reports announced that most, on average, businesses had 3 months working capital. I'm actually quite surprised at that level of working capital, the period of time they've actually got. I think if you look at the way a lot of businesses have been structured over the last 10, 20 years, the balance sheet is so leveraged, there is little scope or provision for a secure financial security for an event like this. So I think there'll be a host of things. So I think, first of all, start with looking at the strategy, then take into account how has the world changed and how will that impact on your business. And that's around attitudes to work, attitudes to finance, attitudes to consumer confidence and spending. The easing lockdown has seen an increase in consumer spending, but at the end of the day, a lot of consumer spending is suppressed, I think, for two particular reasons. Consumer confidence, and consumer confidence is not just about the financial wherewithal. Consumer confidence is also dependent on COVID security. Even from my own experience, going shopping is not a pleasant experience. It probably wasn't for me as a bloke present beforehand, but actually it isn't an enjoyable one. Secondly, if you do go into outlets, often there's supply shortages. So there's a host of things impacting there. I think particularly going back to changing attitudes to work, the way we work, and what people want from work. If you just take the office space, I think a lot of businesses will be looking at their real estate, which is, if you take it predominantly, the two big costs to a business are your people and your real estate. It's your bricks and mortars. I think both those people will be taking a hard look at. I think the other one is, I think there's a challenge for businesses where they furloughed staff and they have unfurloughed staff, so people continue to work. I think there's quite a lot which business leaders often find quite challenging. They may compartment or park some of this more softer area of their challenges of managing businesses around the challenges they face in terms of bringing back workers, readjusting to the work environment. And I think the other one is linking to that is the sense of purpose of what you do in your organisation. That if we continue to work like this, and there's talk of, till the end of the year, a lot of us will probably still be working remotely. That sense of cohesion, in a short period of time, we've adapted well, but imagine a longer period of time or it becoming the new norm, then how do we deal with? So I think there's a lot of things out there. It is, I think the other one is, for me, is another key area is leadership, in terms of, I don't believe this is a singly autocratic or hierarchical leadership style. I think to respond to the current situation requires people to work more collaboratively, either within their own organisation or externally, using people for wisdom, advice and consultation. We can't do this on our own. It isn't a single journey. It is a very volatile world that we live in, and actually we try to operate in. So seeking advice and wisdom from other people is fundamentally important. Yeah.
Thank you, James. How's that? What should businesses be thinking about from your perspective?
Well, it's quite difficult to give one piece of advice that applies to the whole business community, because businesses haven't all been affected in the same way, and they don't have the same resources coming out of lockdown. That said, I think businesses will benefit from taking a step back, planning, get your star players together and connect to your network and to your community. So when I say star players, I mean professional advisors. Speak to your professional advisors. Make sure you're up to date on changes in the law. Make sure you're up to date on the grants and the reliefs that are out there, and keep a closer eye on your numbers. Also, join up with your local chamber, Federation of Small Businesses, Institute of Directors. These are business communities, and they're a wealth of information. The last thing I'll say is not necessarily legal, but it's keep an eye on your brand. Who are you as a business, and who do you want to be to your business community, to your employees, and to your customer base? It's not a cynical question. It's a question of authenticity. That's it. That's it.
Thank you for that. Yeah, some interesting points there. Okay, so companies are going to be left with an increased level of debt moving forward. Have you any advice for what they should do to cope with this?
So it's that sustainability strategy I referred to earlier, and James also alluded to that as well. And I think all professional advisors would urge businesses not to bury their head in the sand, and indeed we have seen some businesses already still doing that. Operating models will undoubtedly need to be reshaped in line with the new marketplace, what is their new normal, and the demands of a post-COVID-19 world. They should ask if their current way of working is sustainable. We've all touched on that point as well. COVID-19 has given businesses, I think, a burning platform for change, and they should consider how to embrace both the agility and the momentum that's been seen over the last couple of months. In terms of finance, they should look to plan for medium and long term to enable them to deliver revised business ambitions. Mike, I know one question that you've already asked on the chat is around that day of reckoning. And I think businesses should produce those realistic forecasts for covering that short, medium and long term, which should be regularly reviewed and flexed as necessary. And they should also track them against actual performance in terms of cash, profit and assets on the balance sheet. And if there is any material underperformance, they should swiftly take any action. And it's really important that they keep all their professional advisors informed against that. And just a word of warning to businesses is they shouldn't present a balance sheet or a business plan and forecast that they think the bank might want to see. A bank or any funder wants to be repaid on time every time. And businesses should be able to demonstrate that they can service their debts, and that doesn't mean just covering the interest costs. Businesses fail, businesses do not fail because of lack of profit. They fail because they run out of cash. Mm-hmm. Quite worryingly, experts predict as many as 40% of businesses could default on those government-backed loans. Mm-hmm. So again, coming back to your point, Mike, about that day of reckoning. That's one statistic that I hope that has been overestimated and that it's proved to be wrong. There are, I think, already early signs of bounce back and new opportunities, and they will continue to present themselves to those that are willing to grab those. And finally, again, Azam's already mentioned this, don't be afraid to ask to support from your professional advisors, including, of course, your own banks.
Thank you for that, Sue. Well, there are common themes in all of that, and the big one is for all our panel is money management and planning, looking forward and not just keeping your fingers crossed and hoping for the best, but talking to your professional advisors about how you see coming out of this in the long term and how you're going to cope with all those financial burdens, if you like, of, you know, people borrowing money left, right and centre, which is fine to keep going in the short term, but longer term, close management of everything and consulting with your professional advisors is critical. What we've seen from the IP point of view is people are thinking about getting protection in place, particularly, you know, as I've said, think about your brand in terms of the overall picture of what your business stands for, but then get in place the protection for the trademarks and so on, which represent that brand. Some companies are doing that now, which is where we've seen, you know, changes in direction and new trademark registrations and so on, because they're thinking about, okay, where do we go from here, which is encouraging. So some businesses are thinking forward, but yeah, plan, consult, and plan again. Watch your money is the message that seems to come strongly from this. So we do, I'm pleased to say, have some questions. Mike, you had a question which I think Sue has addressed in her presentation.
Yes, she has. Yes, thank you. Thanks.
Anne, down in Colchester, I believe, has asked, how does the panel see the interface between SARS-CoV-2 and the end of Brexit transit period, sorry, particularly in terms of the SME bandwidth, as she puts it?
I'll start with that, if you like, Keith.
Thank you.
I think there's a real danger we focus on one thing and the implications of Brexit get forgotten for the moment. And some of it is actually, perhaps, I don't mean to malign media, but media, both the formal media and then social media, creates topics or situations we all get engaged with. And I think there's a real shift from, there's perhaps a sense, well, Brexit's finished with, or it's not high on the agenda. Well, the ramifications are still very, very significant. And whilst transition's in place, there's lots of implications around international trade, working conditions and all sorts of things. So I think as a business, you tend to deal with the immediacy. So it is, what is the immediate, the thing that's affecting me today? I'm running a business, I'll deal with that. So I think there's a real need to perhaps over the next month or so for businesses to start to pick up again on the potential implications and ramifications of Brexit. There is still quite a lot of negotiations still taking place between the UK government and the EU, so that's still some clarifications. But I also like to just pick up on, so I think, you know, we need to bring it back to the agenda and the business table and the business boardroom. Can I just also go back on, I think it was Mike's comment about the VAT. There is a sense that, and with a fellow accounting professional from another firm on the call, I'm sure Damon will probably join in as well on this one. I think there's a real implication of a perfect storm brewing with the tax take and the financial instruments in place that perhaps may hit sort of first or second quarter of next year. I mean, the amount of money that's been put in by the government is in excess of 300 billion so far. You know, and you look at it, it's a bit like, you know, the next need, oh, here's some more money, and everybody else asks for some more money. Somewhere on the line, we've got to address that, the rebalancing. And the VAT is one, the tax deferment, the end to the changes to stamp duty, land tax. There is a sort of sense of perfect storm starting to brew. And perhaps also, which has got knocked down the road, is I call it the tax equalisation between self-employed and employed, that there is in relation to things like the impact of IR35, but there are a number of things that are bubbling under that are going to come to the fore. Now, wisely, obviously, a government's got to balance the implications of change with the economic stability. And I think to some extent that will be dependent on how the pandemic evolves over the coming months and up to throughout the winter. But I do think, going back, Brexit is a key concern, and I think there's a danger we just glibly put it on the side because we're dealing with one issue. It's very easy with business management to go, I have one issue, so I'll just get on with that issue because it's today's issue. Yeah. And this is my point about having a broader perspective about strategic management and leadership in business. You can't do it otherwise. Yeah.
Thank you, James. Thanks.
Can I come in here, please, Keith?
Yes, please.
Yep, yeah. Going back to the original question that Anna asked about can SMEs think about our EU exit as well as the current crisis? One of the things I'm doing now for Business Lincolnshire is working with SMEs to develop action plans to get them through the next 5 months. And I've had it very difficult up until now to get people to think about it, because as James says, Brexit doesn't matter anymore, does it, Mike? We've got far more important things on our plate now. And we've got 5 months from today to get this in place. And yes, I know lots of things haven't been clarified yet, but there's still lots of things that people can do if they put their minds to it. And it's a difficult job getting folks to think about our EU exit as well as the current coronavirus pandemic.
Thanks, Mike.
Can I come back on, Keith, later on to answer Anne's other question about data transfer?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Well, do you want to deal with it now?
Should I? Okay. I mean, Anne's asked the question about the concern about data transfer after December. GDPR isn't going away, unfortunately. It's still going to be there, but it might move in different directions after December. The advice I'm getting, if you're regularly transferring data concerning people's personal data back and forth into the EU after December, you may well need to appoint a data representative within the EU just to act on your behalf for any potential allegations of data breach.
Ooh, right. Well, Bernard, you had a point. I don't know if you'd like to present it more coherently than I will if I read it out.
Yeah, I'm just interested, in previous years, R&D tax credits and patent box have been sort of an opportunity for that source for conversation when for IP practice for an accountant, but presents a wider financial opportunity for SMEs. I've not heard anything at all from anybody in light of events in recent months, what that means for tax credits, what that means for patent box. What are the positive upsides or opportunities where small businesses perhaps can make claims and improve their financial well-being that they're not aware of? Or perhaps it's business as usual and there hasn't been any change at all. I don't know. That was what was behind the question.
Anybody any thoughts on that?
Yeah, if I may, Keith, it's probably more opportune because of linking to the conversations that have been going on that businesses have had to innovate, and therefore a lot of businesses have developed new technologies, new products, new science innovations. They're probably not at the point they're just starting. Keith will know more than me about getting the patents, but certainly the R&D end of it, there's massive opportunities there for people to, in their mind, they've been surviving. In our mind, they've been innovating.
But the issue perhaps there is, that's good, but there's an education that's required, because I don't think most businesses in that particular, most SMEs, micro businesses, are blissfully ignorant of the likes of tax credits and patent box.
I think I agree with you, Bernard, and I think if you take something like also the Future Fund as well, the government, rightly so, has been looking at creating an attractive environment supporting innovation. What I would say about R&D tax credits, I think in the short term, I think collectively the profession's probably seen a bit of stability or consolidation, but actually I think, and I agree with Damon, I think there is an opportunity for businesses to take advantage of such schemes. The question would be, if there is, they need to ensure appropriately they've got the right professional advice, isn't it? It is having firms, with respect to similar to ourselves and Damon's firm, bringing that to their clients' attention and making sure that they're seizing the opportunity. That comes back to this. I think fundamentally, it doesn't matter what discipline you're looking for or what advice is, make sure you've got the right professional advice. It's legal, banking, IP, marketing, it doesn't really matter. It's about you've got the right caliber of advisors around you. And the support, Mike talked about there, there's a lot of support out there from organisations like Business Lincolnshire, delivering support. So it is there. Again, it comes back to, and I think one of the big changes in lockdown is actually there's been a quest for more information or knowledge. Now, some of it may be because we're not physically going to meetings or we're not having those conversations or interactions in our own organisation. So actually, if you look at the traffic and engagement with things like LinkedIn, and other webinar activities. You know, actually, probably now the challenge is there's too many, and actually we need to move to the next generation of virtual events. You know, so I think I think it will come out, and also I know many of the professional firms, as you'll appreciate, Bernard, have spent the last few months informing their clients of the new announcements, the changes. I mean, it's been quite a tall order to actually make sure we're keeping all our clients and businesses informed of, you know, the information. But it comes back to that ability to process it. You know, in theory, we get more information in a year than Albert Einstein had in his lifetime. You know, we can't, you know, ability to process it gets more and more challenging. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's finding that cut through. Just coming back to something you said earlier on, James, about collaboration. And again, I'm only using R&D tax credits, patent box as an example to elucidate a much bigger point. But if you take another one in legal, so for exam, another one would be wills, LPAs. There's so much ignorance within, you know, Joe Public, whether it's an individual, even an organisation, doesn't understand a lot of the basics within both the legal and the accounting world. And arguably, if the likes of Streets were to collaborate with David or whoever, and similarly, you know, Chatterton's collaborating with, dare I say, I don't know, Roythorns or whoever, it can be 1 + 1 = 3. And actually, there's a shared prize for everybody, because, you know, in the case of wills, if only 25% of people have a will in place, well, that's an awful lot of wills, and what starts as a will then leads to a last power of attorney, court of protection, etc., etc., etc.
Yeah, I think what we're finding, we often put this question to clients. You know, have you thought about the tax credits and patent box and so on? They say, oh yeah, our accountants are dealing with that.
Mm.
Rather depends on who their accountants are, I fear, because some firms say, oh yes, we can deal with that, but it's like all things. There's more to it than just, you know, putting in some forms and hoping for the best, as it were. There needs to be proper advice, and, you know, I'm sure the likes of Streets and Duncan and Toplist and so on, their clients will know what the position is. But I fear with some of the smaller firms of accountants, they may be a bit out of their depth on this.
Can I just come in very quickly, Keith, on that? I think the issue isn't necessarily about lack of technical expertise in-house, whether that's an accountancy firm or a law firm. It's about mindset, which is that, regrettably, in my opinion, for most professional service firms, their only engagement with the client is when, you know, it's the year end, or the tax return, or there's a problem. It's reactive, it's not proactive. But so there may well be that capability in-house, but unless the accountant or the solicitor or the business advisor actually takes the initiative and leans forward and contacts that client for conversations outside of compliance, or an open client file, these opportunities will never present themselves. So
I think that's been happening, though, hasn't it, Bernard, to a great extent, prompted by all the changes that have come out because of the coronavirus. I think, you know, we've certainly
yes and no. It's happening in as much as there's lots of information that's been generated, but how many business advisors are actually proactively approaching a particular client to initiate a conversation, to explore what the possibilities are and the ways they can add value outside of the particular transaction or the particular compliance matter that's in front of them?
Yeah. Sorry, there's one question we haven't dealt with. It was from Damon, really, to Sue. Do you want to?
Yeah. Thanks, Keith. So, Damon, your question is, are the government support loans going to continue beyond the end of September? Personal view is yes, I think they will. I think with the possibility that we're facing into a second wave of the pandemic, I think they will. Going back to the forecasting point that I made earlier, a lot of the firms that have that have drawn down loans under the 3 schemes are sat with that cash on their bank accounts. So we see as a bank, although we've lent lots of money under the scheme, it's actually giving us we're in a good position from a liquidity perspective, because it's actually sat with the, in the firm's bank accounts, with the prospect that they will then cover the deferred VAT payments, the deferred tax payments, etc. And obviously once the capital repayment holidays start to kick in, that's when we're going to see cash come out of the banks into other things. So yes, I do think it will be extended beyond the end of September.
Well, I did say we would finish at 11:15, which is now, and I therefore just like to take the opportunity to thank everybody who did take part. Some very interesting points we've learned from all of this. So